Sandra Lowenthal is a mother of 3. Her oldest son, Davy, had his learner's permit and was days away from getting his driver's license when Sandra and her husband made a decision they would later regret.
It became a bit of an issue of trust. I thought, I'm going to permit you to do this with the understanding that you are to go and come straight back.
My mom let me take the car out to a graduation party, even though I only had my permit because it was only like a mile away. And I told her I would be safe and I'd drive home and I'd be fine.
Of course, looking back, never in a million years would I do that again. It was a bad decision.
Given the freedom of just being able to drive around, I made a bad decision, and I thought I'd be able to drive to my friend's house a couple miles, like 15 miles away, and drive home and be fine.
And then every parent's nightmare happened.
I was late. I was supposed to be home by 11:30, and I tried to speed to make up for my time that I lost. And in the process of speeding, it was also raining, and I wasn't aware of my surroundings as well as I should have been. And I went around a corner too fast, and I just got in an accident.
I knew it wasn't good that the phone was ringing because he wasn't home and he should have been on his way home. So I picked up the phone, and it was Davy, pretty hysterical, just pretty much kind of crying out, "Please come get me, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Please come get me. I'll make it up to you." And of course I was in some shock. I didn't know where he was. I said, what are you talking about? Where are you? He said, "I'm off the road. I've been in an accident. Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." "Tell me where you are." And he did tell me. It was about a little over a mile from our house.
I didn't realize how dangerous a car can be until I actually got into an accident where my life was in danger. And it was all because I made the one bad decision that I wanted to take advantage of being able to use the car and see my friend, when I could have just driven home and everything would have been fine.
So the decision that he made to go to Rutland and then to not tell us led to an even more dire decision, which was for him to get in that car 11:30 at night, raining, and try to make good time to get back to home. We're thinking he's 5 minutes away, and he wants to try to make it a 15-minute ride in 10 minutes. We had to go to the salvage yard to see the car. And then we realized how close we had come to losing him.
Dr. Marianne Mano is the Chief of Pediatric Emergency Medicine at UMass Memorial Medical Center. She has pioneered several programs geared toward keeping kids safe.
Teen driving is a huge source of serious injury and death in teens that are completely preventable and avoidable situations.
Dr. Michael Hirsch is Surgeon-in-Chief and Director of Pediatric Trauma at UMass Memorial Children's Medical Center. He is a pediatric trauma surgeon and a longtime child safety advocate.
I think it's a really tragic mistake when a parent doesn't take ownership and really sit the would-be driver down and say, this is really a time we have to reflect about. This machine that we're giving you is like a loaded gun.
Every single year, 6,000 kids die in motor vehicle crashes in our country. And that's a number that is available, it's well established, but a lot of people either don't know or ignore.
Every year, if you imagine taking 20 jumbo jetliners full of teenagers and having them all crash in a field somewhere in Kansas, that's how many kids every year die behind the wheel.
almost all the time, there was a decision that was made that was flawed. It was risky, and the choice was made to do something dangerous. So the cause for these crashes are texting while driving, using cell phones, eating, playing with iPods, speeding, being tired, driving with friends late at night, a whole host of things that contribute to, in general, inexperience.
Judge Carol Erskine is the first justice at the Worcester Juvenile Court.
Oftentimes I'll say to kids, well, what made you think you could drive? And probably the most frequent answer I get is, I do it all the time on my video games. So there's this lack of perception by kids about what is the reality of driving and getting behind the wheel of a real car and getting behind the wheel of a video game.
We teach teens in our driving programs to get away from the concept and the word accident, because we want you to own your behaviors and think about what you're doing and not hear about a crash that your classmate was involved in and say, "Oh, it was just an accident. He didn't mean it." Well, he clearly didn't mean it, but it's likely that he made a choice that contributed to the crash and to the injuries he got, and perhaps his friends did as well.
When the metal of a car hits the metal of another, either vehicle or a guardrail or just rolls over and hits a tree or something, that inside that car is your loved one sitting, sometimes unbelted and unrestrained properly, and their body is in turn crashing into the metal too. And once that crash occurs, then inside the body are all these organs that are getting flailed around, crashing in and of themselves, sometimes tearing, sometimes bleeding, and causing such internal injuries that the patients are pretty much killed instantly.
Almost all injuries, below the neck, we can fix in the emergency department, in the ICU, in the operating room. So you break both of your legs, eventually, if you're a teenager, you'll walk out of the hospital, and it's likely if those are your only injuries, you'll go back to high school and resume, with a little bit of delay, the life that you had before. Teens who have head injuries from motor vehicle crashes have a very different chance of complete recovery.
When the skull kind of hits the brain, there's this rattling back and forth of the brain in the skull cavity. It's a shocking amount of force. I don't think people really understand how much force is involved. The state troopers that we work with all the time that come in from the scenes will tell us, yeah, this one was wearing his seatbelt and that's why you have him, but his two buddies that weren't were ejected out on the road. Those kids never come in. Not to us, they go into the coroner.
B.J. Williams is the Director of Prevention Programs at the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts. After surviving a life-threatening car crash in 2005, B.J. now dedicates his time to educating people about traumatic brain injuries.
I was living the life like any, I guess you could say, teenage boy was, just playing sports and thinking I was going to be the best in my sport and wanting to be the big athlete. I lived for hockey, was my sport. I got the chance to go to the National Sports Academy up in Lake Placid, New York, so being up there with Winter Olympic athletes was beyond anything. After that, I finally got my chance of playing semi-professional hockey, and right before things moved in the right direction, it was one day, one little decision that I made and someone else in the car made changed my life. The driver was driving too fast in the car. He lost control. Hitting the guardrail caused the door to pry open. I was ejected out of the car over 160 feet. Coming to rest, thank God the Coast Guards were driving by on the other side of the highway. They stopped, they came over, they called in the helicopter before even calling in an ambulance. I was bleeding out of the ears, which shows brain injury. I was put on the helicopter when I then went into a coma. Coming out, first thing that I was to be told that hockey was over. Needless to say, it was like conquering and climbing Everest the first year after my accident. I went through every up and down I could go through. Every loss that I never thought could happen, happened. I was left with 4 skull fractures. I was left with multiple skin grafts. I was left with not being able to smell, taste, not being able to hear out of my right ear. So losses that something, you go to your favorite restaurant, you just want to enjoy that food, I don't have anymore. The loss of memories. I have a lot of memories that were lost in my last 2 years before the accident of when hockey was my prime that were taken away from me. Family memories that are gone. I mean, I would never in my life want to see another teen go through that. I would never want a parent to get the phone call that my parents got. I mean, the phone call they got, they were on vacation. I mean, it's the last thing you want your parents to have. I mean, my parents and I and my sister, we can't even sit down and talk about it because we all get emotional. So it's something that has forever changed my family.
Deborah McGovern is a pediatric nurse practitioner and has a doctoral degree in nursing.
Lost my 15-year-old son in an accident as a passenger, being driven by a 16-year-old driver who had his license for 3 months. Unfortunately, both boys did not survive. As a result of that experience in my life, that horrific experience in my life, I decided I had to do something to try to make a difference and maybe prevent other parents from going through what I experienced. I made the decision to go back to school and get involved through research and trying to make a difference in teen driving.
Pat Vanis is a pediatric social worker at UMass Memorial Medical Center.
18 years ago, my son was a recipient of a liver transplant. He was born with a liver disorder. His gift was from a teen driver. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think of that child and that family. If I can prevent one child or family going through that tough decision to be an organ donor of a 15 or 16-year-old, it is worth the time. Today I'm seeing the families I work with, they try to have a friend relationship with their teenager, thinking that that will allow the teenager to open up to them more and they'll know what's going on.
They just don't farm a kid out to driver's ed or farm a kid out to sit behind a wheel without really taking some deep looks at themselves and at the past history of their kid.
The brain doesn't stop developing at a particular age. That it's a little bit individual, but overall, the important parts of your brain that help you make decisions, the prefrontal cortexes of your frontal lobe, don't stop developing until you're about 25.
Even very responsible, smart kids from good families, good kids, as we know, make bad choices. And it's not the bad kids that are always making the bad choices. It can be very good kids that make bad choices. And that's reality of teenagers.
Have you seen evidence that they have the maturity to grasp the gravity of getting behind the wheel? But if we can start a little earlier in kind of making them think, is this the safest way I can get to that destination? Is this the safest combination of drivers and passengers I should have? Is this the right day to do it? Is this the right car to do it in? And then go through some basic safety checks like a pilot would at the beginning of every trip. You know, do I have my seatbelt on? Are my tires okay? Do I have enough gas? Do I know where I'm going? And I think we can make a big impact. Every kid, when they get behind the wheel, maybe before they put their seatbelt on, if you're lucky enough to get them to put their seatbelt on, they're going to plug in their iPod. They're going to make sure that the media in that car is right. And if it's not right, they'll be fiddling all through the time they're driving to get it right.
Teens kind of have the whole idea of it's never going to happen to me. Mm-hmm. They might see crashes on the road, hear of incidents that have happened with friends, but it's just a lack of experience that comes with it. When they may have their permit, they think, okay, I'm learning, but once they get their license in their hand, they feel that, some of them at least, feel that they have everything right there. They're good, they're understanding it.
I hear from a lot of parents that they're not comfortable driving with their teenager, or they feel like they argue too much when they get in the car, and they don't feel like they can teach them, and they don't feel like they're doing a good job, and it's too stressful. So a lot of parents are very uncomfortable with giving them the experience. So I think another piece of advice that I would give to them is, if you're not comfortable and you know you're having all this conflict in the vehicle, find someone else who can, whether it be an aunt or an uncle or a brother, or older brother or sister, cousin, somebody who's an experienced driver and is comfortable driving with their teenager, because they need the experience, and that's one of the most important things you can do.
Studies have shown that 16 to 24 years old is the highest risk, that age being at highest risk of death and injury from crashes.
The decision you make to allow your teen to drive is a huge decision in the life of your family, and you are making that decision to allow your teen to learn how to drive. It's important that parents realize it's a high-risk behavior for teens to engage in, and it can be safe. It's important to realize that it's a process, though, and that process should be a gradual one and a thoughtful one.
Driver's education is the overview, it's the introduction, it's not the full education. That going out with a driving instructor 6 times before you take your actual license exam is not enough experience on the road. It might be enough for the Registry of Motor Vehicles to issue a license, but it's not enough to keep your child safe.
The driver's ed approach was a good start. It was kind of a minimalist start.
A mom and a dad will say to us, well, we put him in the driver's ed course, we put him in the skid school, which goes beyond the driver's ed course. He took all of the classes. We thought he was ready. There's literally no conversation going on about driving and no discussion about driving outside of the actual classes.
A lot of the driving instructors will also step in and say, when they go and take kids out on the road, they can tell if they've actually been behind the wheel for the full 40 hours or even for a couple hours, because they can see how the kids are taking it. If they're taking it in a fearful way, if they're taking it with poise and they're understanding what's going on the road, even their behaviors with it. So they might inherit some of the behaviors that their parents do.
The key is to try to get parents to give them as much experience as possible. They think they're going to get all they need from driver's ed, and they're going there and they're getting their driving experience, and now they're all set to drive. And that's, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions that parents have.
Parents need to stay involved in the choices that their teens make about driving, and parents need to be informed and educated about the limitations that teens have in cognitive thinking, their ability to make good judgments and anticipate consequences.
I think that all parents should be good models for teenagers, because that's how they're going to drive. They're teaching their kids how to drive, and they're going to take after their parents directly.
The challenge for parents of teens who are learning how to drive is to allow their teen to develop experience in a safe setting. Parents can't make their kids' prefrontal cortexes develop faster, and parents can't give their teens judgment and experience simply by sending them to driver's ed or sort of telling them, make a good choice. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Parents make more of a difference in their teens' decision making than anybody else.
You got to practice what you preach, and what you do behind the wheel, your kids are going to see and they're going to follow, whether it's good, whether it's bad.
If you're a parent that as soon as you get into your car, you buckle up, that is sending a message to your child every time you do it.
A major conversation for us is to educate the parents about having constant discussions with kids in the car when they're driving, pointing things out, discussing it after they get their permit, and driving with them while they are in driving school.
But while you have that personal time in the vehicle, it can be a great opportunity to get closer to each other and be able to build a better bond between parent and teenager.
Many of the cases we see involve kids who have a permit or are newly licensed and violate the laws regarding the restrictions on their licenses.
There are two main restrictions on a junior operator. For the first 6 months, a junior operator is restricted from carrying passengers under the age of 18, unless they are siblings, without a licensed driver who is at least 21 years old. The night restriction prohibits junior operators from driving between 12:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. unless accompanied by a parent or legal guardian.
So understanding what those laws are and taking your child out and letting them know, rather than just saying this is what it used to be when I got my license, rather than what it is now.
The reason why the laws are there, they're not there to punish the teenagers, they're not there to punish parents. They're designed to save teenagers, and they're designed to help us follow those laws for a reason, and it's only because research has shown we know the risk factors, and the laws were designed surrounding the risk factors.
The contract is just a good understanding between the parent and child about what to expect from each other.
It allows parents and teens to come together in a very specific way around the kinds of situations that are very risky and often are situations when teens get involved in crashes.
It's very helpful. It helps add communication skills, trust, just a knowledge to teens of learning, to even parents learning.
It lets me know that I can call my mom or dad whenever I need to if I get in a certain situation where I'm unable to drive. And I know that even though I can't drive, I know that they'll be able to pick me up and we won't have to talk about it then.
It's a one-pager. They're very, very simple to utilize, and you can put it right on your refrigerator and it's right there for everybody.
It lays out what you as a parent are going to do in certain situations if the child finds that at any time, night or day, if for any reason they're not able to drive, that the parent will come, no questions asked, and they will get the child, bring them home, and then at some point later, they'll have, talk about what happened.
It just gives you that feeling that you know you're going to be safe, that you have an option to call them.
Take the initiative and want to be involved. It's a life accomplishment for your child to be getting their license, and it's something you really want to be part of. It's not something that you want someone else out there doing all the teaching and all the acknowledging of. It's something you want to be part of.
I think parents do have the ability to keep their kids safe. I think parents are great today under really difficult circumstances. I think the bottom line is you love your child no matter what, and that you can keep them safe.
I've always viewed injury prevention, including the prevention of injury and death from car crashes, to be part of my job as a doctor and an extension of the work that I do in the hospital. But I really developed a lot of passion and I think a much deeper understanding of the challenges as a parent. I have 3 young drivers in my household and have gone through the process of helping them learn how to drive. I think for my husband and myself, we tried our best to keep a dialogue that was open and truthful and honest, and deal with situations as they came up, and make our kids realize that our goal was not to control them, but to keep them safe.
It was an almost fatal decision. He had an angel on his shoulder that night, right. And I know that it was just for the grace of God that he's still with us.
As your child gets ready to drive, please remember these key points. One decision can make all the difference. Driver's education is part of the process, but it's not enough on its own. Parents are natural role models and can be their child's best teacher. A driving contract is a great way to designate responsibility and keep everyone safe. Funding was provided by the Allstate Foundation.